You're holding a piece of paper that says it's worth $10. But it's just paper, ink and fiber, yet you trust it completely. But get this, the moment you start asking why that trust exists, the entire system starts to look terrifyingly fragile. And 1,000 years ago in China, they learned this lesson the hard way. Welcome to the story of jiaozi, the world's first paper money, and the inflation crisis that nearly destroyed an empire. If you want to understand why your money works, or why it might stop working, this is where it begins. So make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to reverse engineer one of history's most dangerous inventions. Let's get into it. The year is 1023, Song Dynasty, China. You're a merchant in Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province. You've just sold a shipment of tea, and you're staring at payment. 60 pounds of bronze coins. 60 pounds. That's the problem. China's economy is booming, trade routes are expanding, cities are growing, commerce is everywhere. But the money itself is killing you, literally. Bronze coins are heavy. A single string of 1,000 coins weighs about 7 pounds. If you're moving any serious amount of wealth, you need a cart, guards, and a prayer that bandits don't find you on the road. So merchants in Sichuan start doing something clever. They deposit their coins with a shop, get a receipt, and use that receipt to settle debts. The receipt says, this paper is worth 1,000 coins, redeemable at this location. It's brilliant, it's convenient, and it works, because everyone in the local network trusts the shop to honor the promise. This is the birth of jiaozi. The word literally means exchange medium. It's not money yet. It's a private IOU. But it's about to become something much bigger. Here's the thing. This system only works if trust holds. The merchant issuing the receipt needs to actually have the coins in reserve. If he doesn't, the paper is worthless. And for a while, this works fine. These notes circulate locally, people redeem them when they need to, and the system hums along. But then the government notices, and they see an opportunity. The Song Dynasty has a problem. They're fighting the Liao Dynasty to the north and the Western Xia to the northwest. Wars are expensive. The imperial treasury is bleeding bronze. They need to pay soldiers, supply armies, and maintain a border that stretches for thousands of miles. But here's the kicker. They're running out of metal. The copper mines can't keep up with demand. Minting coins requires bronze, and bronze requires copper and tin. There's a bottleneck. So in 1024, the Song government steps in. They take over the jiaozi system. They say, from now on, only the state can issue these notes. Private jiaozi is banned. Government jiaozi is the only legal tender, and here's the promise. You can take this paper to a government office and exchange it for coins anytime you want. It's called convertibility. The paper is backed by metal. That's the deal. That's the foundation of trust, and for a while it works beautifully. The government prints jiaozi in limited amounts. Merchants use it, soldiers get paid in it, the economy expands. Paper money becomes real money. But there's a trap buried in this system. A trap that every government in history has eventually fallen into. Because once you have the printing press, once you control the supply of money, the temptation to print more becomes almost irresistible. Let me explain the mechanism. Imagine you're the Song Emperor. You need to fund a military campaign. You have two options. Option 1, raise taxes. This is unpopular, slow, and politically dangerous. People riot when you raise taxes. Option 2, print more jiaozi. This is fast, invisible, and gets you the money immediately. You just print it. No one sees it happening. The inflation comes later. Which option do you choose? If you said option 2, congratulations, you think like every government under pressure. And that's exactly what the Song Dynasty did. By the 1040s, the amount of jiaozi in circulation has tripled. The government is printing notes to cover military expenses, to pay officials, to fund infrastructure. But they're not increasing the bronze reserves. The ratio is slipping. There's more paper chasing the same amount of metal, and people start to notice. A merchant shows up at a government office with a stack of jiaozi and says, "I want my coins." And the official says, "We're a little short right now. Come back next month." That's the moment. That's when trust starts to crack. Because convertibility isn't just a technical feature, it's the entire psychological foundation of the system. If the paper can't be redeemed, it's just paper. And once people believe redemption is uncertain, they panic, they rush to convert, and the system collapses. This is the first recorded inflation crisis in paper money history. By the 1070s, jiaozi has lost half its value. Prices are soaring. Merchants are refusing to accept it. The government tries to fix it by issuing new notes, retiring old ones, and tweaking the system. But the damage is done. The trust is gone. And here's the brutal part. This isn't a mystery. This isn't some strange economic accident. It's incentives. The government needed money. Printing was easier than taxing. Inflation was the predictable result. The Song dynasty didn't misunderstand their system. They understood it perfectly. They just couldn't resist the temptation. Let's zoom out for a second. What makes money work? It's not the material. Gold isn't valuable because it's shiny. It's valuable because we agree it's valuable. Same with paper. Same with digital numbers on a screen. Money is a social agreement, a collective hallucination. And that hallucination only holds if the institution behind it maintains discipline. The Song government tried. They really did. They created offices to manage issuance. They used seals and serial numbers to prevent counterfeiting. They set quotas. They established redemption windows. They built an entire bureaucracy around making paper credible. But they couldn't solve the core problem. When the incentive to overissue is stronger than the incentive to restrain, the system breaks. And it always breaks the same way. Too much money. Not enough trust. Inflation. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Song dynasty didn't give up on paper money. They kept using it for another 200 years. They learned to manage it better. They introduced regional currencies. They experimented with denominations. They even created a version backed by silver instead of bronze. They adapted. But the lesson was learned. Paper money is a game of credibility management. It's not about the paper. It's about whether people believe the promise written on it. And that belief is always one bad decision away from collapse. Let's connect this to today. You're living in a world where almost all money is paper or digital. The US dollar hasn't been backed by gold since 1971. It's fiat currency. It's valuable because the government says it is, and because people believe that claim. Sound familiar? The mechanism is the same. The promise is the same. The temptation is the same. Governments print money when they need it. They call it quantitative easing or stimulus or emergency measures, but it's the same playbook the Song dynasty used 900 years ago. Print first. Deal with inflation later. The difference is that modern central banks have better tools. They can adjust interest rates. They can manage expectations. They can communicate more transparently. But the fundamental tension hasn't changed. Discipline versus desperation. Restraint versus immediate need. And when the pressure is high enough, discipline loses. Every time. You can see this pattern repeat across history. The Romans debased their coins. The French printed assignats during the Revolution. Weimar Germany printed marks until they were worthless. Zimbabwe printed dollars until people used them as wallpaper. Venezuela, Argentina, the list goes on. It's not a bug. It's a feature of how power and money interact. Because money is power, and the people who control money will always face the choice: maintain the system's integrity or use the system to solve an immediate crisis. Most of the time, the crisis wins. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The jiaozi system didn't fail because the Song dynasty was incompetent. It failed because the incentives were too strong. War is expensive. Maintaining an empire is expensive. And when you have a printing press, using it is irresistible. The same logic applies today. Governments face crises, pandemics, wars, recessions, and every time the printing press gets turned on, the money supply expands, and we hope, we trust, that the system can absorb it without breaking. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The question isn't whether inflation will happen, it's whether the institutions managing the money can maintain enough discipline to keep the inflation gradual instead of catastrophic. That's the game. That's always been the game. And the Song Dynasty played it as well as anyone could, until they couldn't anymore. So what's the takeaway here? Money is trust. And trust is fragile. The technology doesn't matter. Whether it's bronze coins, paper notes, or blockchain, doesn't change the fundamental equation. If people believe the money is good, it works. If they don't, it collapses. And the institutions that issue money are always, always tempted to issue too much. That's the lesson of Jiaozi. That's the lesson of every currency crisis in history. You can have the best seals, the smartest bureaucrats, the most sophisticated central bank in the world, but if the incentive to print is stronger than the incentive to restrain, the system will break. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And 900 years later, we're still playing the same game. The stakes are higher. The tools are more advanced. But the rules haven't changed. Money is a promise. And every promise can be broken. That's the real invention of Jiaozi. Not paper money, but the realization that money is only as strong as the trust behind it. And trust, once lost, is almost impossible to rebuild. If this changed how you see money, make sure you're subscribed. We're digging into the mechanics of power every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.